their reputation as an actual footballing side improved now that they've gone 3-0 through a pretty tricky group, despite the adversity. Yet we have all that, but they played 3 good games, a tournament where they weren't considered to be a hot favorite to defend their title. But at this point, they're looking pretty good. I mean, has the reputation improved as a footballing side to get everything else?
Is hot favorite, is that what used to be in the Toronto Sun? Was that like the page 6? Was that the hot favorite?
That was Greg Forrest.
It's page 3.
Oh, yeah, Jimmy.
Anyway, page 6.
There's Jimmy. There he is.
You knew that answer.
No,
it's page 3.
I think it has, Sharms. I think this is a team, like, they know how to Olympic. They don't really yet know how to World Cup. Like, they have yet to sort of add their resume with that.
I'm just doing this.
He turned off his camera,
Forrest
not his microphone.
Doesn't know how to mute.
Sorry.
Hey, Dad, I'm just podcasting.
You dare watch?
Put your pants on, Dad.
Dad, you're not worth a bean.
You didn't hear shit. You're not worth a bean, Dad.
Oh, boy.
Just giving him a thumbs up.
Sorry, Dobbs. Yeah, good footballing side.
Yes. So I think they've proven that, right? I think that the 3 performances were different. It required different elements. It required different players to rise to the occasion. I think it was sort of less impressive footballing wise against Colombia, and they were without Maya Ramirez. I think that was absolutely to Canada's benefit or to Canada's advantage. But and Jimmy's letting us know that it's time to check out your library books, like Dimming the Lights. But and that's, I think, just it's a happy accident, because they just, I think we would have been proud of this team regardless, right? But I think that what they've been able to accomplish, I think, is right up there with the top performances ever in this program's history, men and women's teams included, right?
Just because of what they're facing away from the pitch.
What they're facing outside. But I mean, I think if you just take that France match and everything that it represented.
Can I ask
that's
a
right
really
up there with the gold
uncomfortable
medal.
question?
That was a lot of energy that they used in that France match. A hell of a lot of energy. And you could see a little bit in the next game, but you're right. I agree with Dubs that it was a very professional performance. They managed it well, and they deserved it. And I think what I love too is I love the interviews after the matches, just how passionate they are and how honest they are. And it's you can't help but love this team, the players at the moment, for what they're doing and they're achieving. And I also think, Sharms, I think one of your questions that you've asked numerous times has been answered here. Do teams need a head coach?
Yes. They don't.
Right?
They don't.
Jimmy's putting himself out of work. He doesn't realize what he's doing right now.
Yeah, no, I realize it.
Can I ask a really uncomfortable question here? Craig, let's go to you for this, but you can all jump in. And I think we need to ask this question. Are we giving the players a free ride here to assume that no one had any suspicion of anything going on? If this has been systemic in Canadian soccer for a decade, which is what Canada soccer is telling everyone, it's been there for a long time, to assume that no one knew anything was going on, do you believe that?
Well, I also think that it's a case of that. I'm sure that there's some rumors going around, but also the case of when you're a player, you don't want to lose your position. You just go along with it. I'm sure a lot of them never saw drone footage, but they might have had information from what they discovered in a drone. But I honestly don't think that that's an awful lot. But overall, we have to believe that the mass majority might have heard rumors, but they, had no part to play in it. And I don't think that any of the performances going back over the years have anything to do with what they found out on a drone. I think we just seen that over these last 3 games, that these women can go through adversity in many different ways and come out the other side. And that's incredibly impressive. And I'm with Amy on that, where I don't think I've seen anything, and we could be guilty of recency bias, of course, but when you look at what they've gone through and winning these 3 games that they absolutely had to. And then also after that New Zealand game, they weren't even sure whether they're going to be around. There was a chance that they might have been disqualified completely. So there's a lot hanging over their head. And I think the the actual narrative of the New Zealand game, I think there was a lot of people probably cheering for New Zealand, thinking that they got cheated, and so having to deal with that, and then, dealing with the French game and how brilliantly they did with that. And I thought Colombia, and I'd like to also hear what Dubs' opinion is on the substitutions, because the rest of the squad and the impact players coming off the bench have been timely and excellent in my view.
But why I asked the question, Jimmy, right? I mean, people will be saying that even if there was a suspicion on the players' part, it was their obligation to bring it to the forefront. Do you agree with that? Because that is going to be said.
It will be said, Sharms, but I think you got to realize too, a lot of the times when a player comes into a meeting with the coaching staff, I don't think I've ever asked, where did you get your material? You don't know as a player the rules, regulations behind the scenes of what coaches and staff do know about. You're kind of privy to it because it's none of your business, so you don't know what the rules are. And when they're showing you tactical training sessions of oppositions and movements, you're going with it because you think, okay, this is fine. I guess the coaches have it, so we trust them, we believe in them, and we're watching these videos. And a lot of the times you don't understand what the rules are behind the scenes.
And 99% of all the information you're getting is quite accessible for everybody to find. You can find all sorts of games, and the chances are they're not going to change all their 11 players. And what you see in the last 3 or 4 games is pretty much what you're going to see in the next game as well. There's no secrets really anymore.
I'm glad you guys said that, because I just had to ask a question. But yeah, of course, that's I think where I'm coming from as well. Dubs, but do you think this stuff it is tarnishing the image of Canadian soccer? Do you think it's going to continue to do that, or do you think it's going to blow over outside of Canadian soccer circles?
I think it's tarnishing the image of the federation, because I think it's these types of situations, these types of scandals, these types of off-field distractions seem to be a recurring theme. I think that the players, in the way that they've performed, in the way that they've behaved, the character that they've shown, the way in which they've done it, I think they've separated themselves from that narrative. And I think last week, it feels like a year ago when we were first talking about this, but I was talking about, the risk of them returning into that Olympic village and being pariahs. I think now, not only are the rest of that Canadian delegation rooting for them and backing them and proud of them, I think that they've garnered probably support that's well beyond their own Canadian contingent. I think that even if they are to lose, or they lose in the quarterfinal matchup against Germany, or they progress, like this is perhaps the story of the tournament so far. Like one of these stories where I was asked a question this morning. It was, if this scandal doesn't happen, does this team are they still galvanized? Do they rally, and do they string together performances in the run of form that they've been on in order to get out of Group A? And I was like, shit, like I never even thought of that. And I said, well, actually, I was able to kind of find my bearings again and say, well, no, I think that the way that they were playing, since they had a disappointing World Cup, they were on their own little run of momentum. They were in a good spell. They looked strong. I think the goal scoring was always a question. But I think they were tactically sophisticated enough. You had the right depth in the roster. I think that the injuries kind of solved some issues for that coaching staff. And now minus Bev Priestman, now I think it's almost like the shackles are off. There's a new kind of freedom and confidence that this team is playing with, sort of aside from everything that's happened.
Because the story was going around that it wasn't a happy camp under Bev Priestman for some time now. And it seems as if you hear Vanessa Gilles talk about it, she speaks so well. And I forget who else, maybe it was Jessie Fleming too, saying that she's never been in a team like this. There's something about this group that they are so together. And whether they were always that, just they were, they couldn't exhibit it because of the coaching situation. Who knows? Maybe Andy Spence is the little common denominator here. Is he come in with an iron fist? Clearly not, right? Are they doing it because of him or despite him? because he's connected to that coaching staff as well. It's a really interesting conversation that I think what is happening behind the scenes with the current coaching staff on the ground there. How much did they know?
It is, but I want to just delve in a little bit to the approach of a Spence, and maybe Jimmy, you can take this first off. Is, do you just get out of the way of the players at that point? Like, obviously you need to have you embrace them a little bit and then give them a little bit of direction and guidance, but you need to be different enough from Priestman in order to kind of let them loose and exhibit all of the talent and the grit and the determination that they've shown so far. But you don't want to snuff it out by involving yourself too much. So how do you approach that type of unique situation as a coach?
I think in those situations, you've got to understand that there's a hell of a lot of emotion that's going to be running through all these players, and you can't overload them, and you've got to allow them to step on that pitch and express themselves. And you can't pull the reins. You got to let them go. Because those players will collectively be getting together and be rallying each other and saying, we've got to do this now. We're doing this for ourselves. We're doing this for our country. We're not cheats. We got nothing to do with this. And we're going to prove to everybody that we're a good team and we are the defending champions. And as the coach, you got to stand back. You got to let them go. Yeah, okay. You've got to give them a little bit of insight into how you're going to play and what you're going to do, but not too much, because you could see in the games, especially that France game, that was emotion that they were playing with, but it was controlled emotion. Mm-hmm. And they weren't losing their heads. It was just everybody on the same page. There was no passengers. And as a coach, sometimes you've got to let them go. Just go play. Go play. Forget about all the nonsense that's going on outside. You've got free reins. Here's our formation. This is what we're doing. There's the opposition's weakness. Get at them now. Go show everybody and go prove everybody wrong.
You're just kind of steering it a little bit, right? And
you're just keeping the ship on track.
Yeah. And I think two names I think that have not gotten enough attention, and one in particular is Desi Scott. So when Sydney Collins gets injured, Gabby Carl, and I thought that was highly unjust that she was an alternate. She gets slid into that 18, a player who's continually not rated by Bev Priestman. I think it's clear that she had the start in those first two matchups. There's also the injury to Jade Rivera. I think that factored into that decision. But it's clear that maybe Andy Spence doesn't think the same. And that means that Desi Scott comes into that group of four alternates. And I think the impact that she's probably having as the anchor point to that leadership group and to somebody who's been there before, like she's the last remaining link to their first bronze medal at an Olympics, to that 2012 team. Everybody else is retired. So I'm sure that she is a person that's been a sounding board, that she's been somebody who's just been absolutely resolute in her backing of these players, knowing that she's not going to get a sniff of the field, but that has just been there for the likes of Jessie Fleming, for the likes of Vanessa Gilles, who has emerged. And to me, as I said in the opening, just exhibited everything that this team is made of, but in a singular kind of individual approach, and just emblematic of all of those great things that they've displayed. But I mean, to have somebody like Desi Scott, who's there for these players in the background, doesn't want any of the limelight, but is there to make sure that things are kind of reined in and stay on track. And as you said, Jimmy, controlled emotion. Like, it's one thing to like put out all that output, but it's quite another to just be on that edge. And then I'm the type of person, I was the type of player that played on that edge on the pitch, left it all out there. But sometimes you're so close, you need somebody there to kind of keep you in check. And she, to me, is somebody who's doing that in the background for this club. And I haven't heard her name mentioned, and I wanted to make sure to talk about her today, because she's a hugely important piece of that 22-person squad.
And emotionally, don't you think, Dubs, it takes a lot out of these players as well? They've gone through an awful lot emotionally. The turnover for these games is pretty quick as well. And my worry would be how they relax, how they get rest, how they feed themselves, how they get over this hump for that as well, to be able to do it again in such a short period of time against a world-class team like Germany.
They're not eating, apparently, according to Vanessa Gilles. They're not eating. They're just crying and punching holes in walls. So that's the diet, apparently. I'm going to try that. Just start weeping and punching walls and see how they lose some pounds. I'll give anything a whirl.
They also need a virtual background then, Sharps. You might have to send them all a virtual background. Through
my virtual background. We have to, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of players in demand post-tournament for interviews, but Dubs, you have to use your connections there. because I'm these are all good interviews, the majority of them, right? I want to get some truths spoken about what happened there behind the scenes. What is the true feeling of these players post-tournament? But listen, Craig, nothing's changed, right? As far as pre-tournament goals, if they lose to Germany, okay, it won't be a disaster. I mean, considering what they come through, wow, great. But before the tournament, that wouldn't have been acceptable as being a good tournament. They won, I would think, the semi-finals at least, right? So from a footballing standpoint, nothing's changed, has it?
Well, not now, I guess. I mean, you could have had a little softer touch, I guess, in the quarterfinals in Germany. And if they win against them, then they have the winner of Japan, US. So this is an exceptionally tough run for them. And every game that they played so far has been a cup final because they've needed to pick up 3 points in all the games that they've played. And they've done that brilliantly well. But my concern is just how much left in the tank that they have.
And I think you saw that creeping into that performance against Colombia. And then we go back to, I talked about it, and then you brought it up again for us about how timely the substitutions have been. And you saw a player like Becky. I was surprised that she wasn't a starter against France. And we thought, and I was chatting with Claire, and I think she mentioned it on the broadcast too, that you think maybe she's only got 30 minutes. This is part of her return to play, and you've got to manage that a little bit more closely. And a player like Prince maybe only has about a half. I think the insertion of Prince, I think, freed up Heidema, who I was critical of. I was on the call for the TSN national broadcast on the radio, and I was critical of her. I said, you can only have, this potential, this upside for so long until you have to prove it, right? Like you have to actually do it in practice. And the fact that she was preferred over some other players like Evelyn Vienne, I didn't really understand. But I think that the insertion of Prince not only gave them fresh legs, gave them some pace, gave them some threat in behind, but it allowed Heidema to link up and allowed her to be the outlet as they were going forward. And that's something that they were lacking in that first half. And I thought that Spence managed that well, but you're really seeing the quality of this full squad emerge. But I think you're seeing that emotional fatigue, the mental fatigue kind of creep into the physical nature that is footballing, right? Like it's going to creep in there. So I think it's how well can they recover in the really quick turnaround between games. But if they can do that, then they can keep progressing. And who knows, if they can get past Germany, they might find themselves in the semis again versus the US. That would be a matchup that we saw in Tokyo with the Jessie Fleming heroics on the penalty.
Let's not think too far ahead, though, just yet. Right, Germany's next. I mean, come on, Dubs. Yeah, there's got to be a lot of athletes out there at the moment in various sports looking at their coach and going, you know what? Don't think I need you. I don't. Why are you taking a percentage of my fees? In the Diamond League, I can run. You'd be taught to run. So this could be the worst thing ever to happen to head coaches, and we are at the forefront of it. Not only are head coaches being banned for a year because of Canada, but they're being exposed as the phonies that they actually are, Jimmy.
As redundant.
Redundant.
That's harsh.
I love how Jimmy's just sitting there stunned. Forrest is like, that's harsh. Jimmy hasn't moved.
Jimmy's just thinking awful things about me. That's what he's doing.
No,
he's rewriting his resume
because
right now.
I'm just thinking you're not that confident as a coach, and as what you think you are if you're flying a drone to watch somebody's opposition.
That's a good point. No, but everyone does it, Jimmy. You saw the quotes. No, everyone does it.
No, they don't all do this. What a load of bullshit.
And specifically John Herdman, right?
If you're good at your job and you understand it and you're prepared, you don't need to fucking cheat. I'm sorry. You don't need to fly drones if you're good at your job. That's insecurities for me. You got some issues. It
is fun, though, to fly a drone, I'd imagine.
Well, they're actually not doing it. Other people are flying it for them.
No, we need Rhonda Brownlee to put John Herdman and Bev Priestman on a drone. So we could actually driving it as pilots.
Like it's Aladdin? Like they're on a magic carpet, but it's a drone?
Like the
John Herdman says he'll talk, speak when the time is right, which isn't now apparently. And TFC said they won't comment until after the investigation. But I mean, what could this mean, do you think, for John Herdman, Craig? I mean, if there wasn't an official complaint, while he was doing this, with the national team, then I don't know what sanctions could come down unless there were official complaints and FIFA dealt with it, behind the scenes. What's your thought on this?
Well, with an investigation, they're going to obviously look at prior indiscretions, and some of those were unprovable at the time. But what happens is if it gets written down enough and documented enough, then when something like this happens, and it clearly goes back to John Herdman, well, then all of a sudden that becomes more likely that it actually happened. So I don't think he's in the clear yet, as well as other people that were part of the CSA at that time. I mean, we do know, and it is kind of comforting that we're in different hands at the moment. And I think we're all pretty much in agreement that up to this point, Kevin Blue has done a really good job. And it's not his job now to cover over this. It's his job to clean it up and make sure that all the positivities that we see on the field continue off the field, because he's got a big job to do as far as money goes, to try to get more money, corporate Canada to get involved for 26 World Cup, all these things. So I think that he'll make sure that everything's cleaned up completely, and it might take a few people down in the meantime, but as long as it's seen as we're going in the right direction, which it seems like we are, a lot of positivity going around behind the scenes, I think that it's fair to say that he's going to do a good job with this as well, and he's not going to pull any punches when it comes to penalties or people that are involved. They're going to be pointing fingers.
Sharm's sorry, I'm going to jump in. Also, Dubs and I were talking on Saturday just about if you're a disgruntled ex-player under Herdman or under Priestman, and you have a bit of you feel like you need redemption, that's a dangerous person for whether, and we were talking about two things can be true at the same time, that, hey, they're getting even on a personal level, but they're also showing the light of what's been going on. And it's quite interesting to see how this all plays out, the names that will be attached across the board, because if they're going to come clean, people are going to have to testify, and they can't hide on the shadows and go, yeah, we saw that all the time. We were using drone footage. We didn't know, to Jimmy's point, you don't know where it comes from. It could be 3% of the things you see every day. I used to do film and football 2 hours a day. You never knew where it was coming from, and you didn't care. So there's that aspect of an axe to grind and telling the truth. It could be damaging across the board. And if you're Kevin Blue, to Craig's point, holy shit, the people that will be affected, like across down all the way through the tentacles. This seems like a really horribly kept secret that was going to come out at some point, especially with the Canadian logo on the drone and Bev and John flying it. They shouldn't have been flying it.
I'm sorry. There's a steering wheel on your drone?
Yeah. Haven't you seen drones?
Please make it like you're driving a bus. It's like the big steering wheel.
The big steering wheel? Yeah, that's one. Dubs, do you think it's going to be house cleaning here at some point from that side of things? Like going back far enough? I mean, if they can find the evidence, if it's irrefutable, how does Kevin Blue have any choice but to do that?
No, he doesn't. Going back to my point about how you said, is the players, the players' legacy still risks being tarnished, right? So if their past performances, if their gold medal is potentially in doubt because of unethical, unsporting practices and decisions of staff, then of course John Herdman's career should also be in jeopardy, because you have to consider his past practices, the way that he's navigated life outside, the confines of the field, how he maintained relationships, what type of decisions that he made. So I'm not going to speculate or surmise about what the nature of those relationships were. But if we're going to hold people to account, and Canada Soccer, I say we, so we as Canadians, as part of this soccer culture, if we want to make things right, and we want to make sure that now, like, we're on course towards 2026 and beyond, doing things by right, or in the right way, by way of our athletes, then let's get our governance in order. Let's get our own house in order. And you do it by coming down swiftly and strongly and harshly on these types of behaviors. And so it's going to be John Herdman. It's going to be maybe Jason DeVos. It's going to be maybe Earl Cochran. It's going to, like, the list goes on and on and on, right? Depending how far reaching this practice was. And, you know, it's going to, I have compassion and I have empathy for these people and how their livelihoods and their families and their own personal reputation is going to risk being damaged. But that's what you have to do if you're Kevin Blue. Yes, you've come in now and you've inherited all this shit. But if you want to make it right, that's what you have to do.
I'm just trying to think what recourse they'd have, though, on John Herdman, for example, if they found reason for that. He works for TFC now, not Canada Soccer.
Right. Well, he can't make those decisions in terms of his employment. That's under the jurisdiction of MLS and MLSC and TFC. But if information comes to light, then you have to, as part of this external independent audit or review, that you do that in a very swift manner. You get it done. You communicate the results. You're transparent about everything, even if it casts you in a bad light. And then they do with that information what they will. But you put it out there and you say, this is how we're going to proceed. And this is what we deem sort of to be integral to the way that we want to conduct ourselves. And then it's up to everybody else how you see Canada Soccer. But if you're Kevin Blue, you absolutely have to do it that way.
And FIFA's not finished with it either.
No.